Welcome to Compassionate Conversations, where we push the boundaries of comfort to empower you to become all that you dream of being. Hi everyone, I'm Esther Kane, Canadian psychotherapist and author. For over 25 years, I have helped thousands of highly sensitive people take back their power by owning their sensitivity and seeing it as a superpower rather than a mental health issue. To my great delight, I get to bear witness to these incredible transformations every day. For more information on the highly sensitive personality, please visit this page on my website to learn more, as well as how to assess whether you or a loved one is an HSP. If you are a highly sensitive person, you have probably struggled for most of your life believing that you were deeply flawed and didn't fit in. This can lead to internalized shame and self-blame about not being like most of the people around you. You are not alone. At least 20% of other humans across the globe have experienced that too, including me. The video you are about to watch is part of a series of interviews featuring some of my favorite highly sensitive people, or HSPs. We will take a deep dive into what it's like to be an HSP in a non-HSP world, as well as sharing tricks and tools that we've learned to accept our sensitivity and flourish in all areas of our lives. We hope you find these as helpful and life-changing as we do. The goal of this series is to emancipate, uplift, and empower highly sensitive people the world over. Join me and some other HSPs in this unique series in order to see that there are others just like you who experience the world in similar ways and have learned to navigate it powerfully and peacefully. Nathaniel Richman is the founder and creative director of Enrich Media, a website design company which helps individuals and organizations market themselves and grow while also making a positive impact on the world. Check them out at www.nrichmedia.com. He also happens to be my husband of nearly 22 years, and we are near to celebrating 24 years together. Why am I dragging him here to be a YouTube video and podcast guest? Well, because he happens to be a highly sensitive person who is also a male, and I needed one to interview today. I am so proud of him for doing this, as well as extremely grateful because he is much more of an introvert than I am and normally avoids the spotlight at all costs. And as I've been saying in this HSP video series, our voices as HSPs desperately need to be heard because we have so much to contribute. And if my darling hubby was running this world, I don't think we'd be in the horrible state we find ourselves in today. Having Nathaniel as my rock and sidekick for so many years has made me a better person because he is so wise and guides me in the right direction when I get off course, which is a lot of the time. I am convinced that this is mostly due to his being a highly sensitive man. Welcome, Nathaniel.
Thank you. Good to be here.
I'm glad you're here. So just so you all know, we're in the same house on different levels. And the reason we're not together in the same room is it just looks better in terms of the video quality. And for those of you listening, this doesn't matter. Okay, so here are my questions for you. What do you see as the differences between HSP men and non-HSP men?
Well, it's sort of in the name. HSP men are certainly more sensitive to things going on in a situation. I think a lot of us highly sensitive guys, and probably women as well, just can walk in a room and sort of feel what's going on or get the sense of what how people are feeling, and we kind of assume that everybody gets that, but turns out that's not the case. I think the non-HSP people just are on a different wavelength than we are, and we takes us a while to understand that that's not the case. So We have depends how you look at it, either the advantage or disadvantage of really sensing what other people are going through in a situation.
Mm-hmm. No, excellent. Well put. I wanted to share with everyone what Elaine Aron, who is the queen mother of highly sensitive people, she wrote the Highly Sensitive Person and the whole series of highly sensitive people books, and has been studying the HSP temperament for over 40 years. She wrote an article called How Are Highly Sensitive Men Different? And we'll put that in the show notes. And she came up with an acronym called STYLE, which I like, for HSMs, she calls them, highly sensitive males. So the first letter is S, and that's for strategic, or depth of processing and action, since males must act and keep an eye on other males, especially those who are more aggressive. And T is for testosterone. She says you cannot explain an HSM by thinking he is more feminine. And Y for wise yielding, to live to fight better another day and in another way, and yielding as in high yield investments. Yielding can be misperceived as weakness, but it isn't at all, as when in the martial arts, especially in judo, you use the other's attack to defeat them almost effortlessly while preserving your own mental and physical energy. L is for leadership, either among people or becoming leaders in their fields, in the arts, science, business, athletics, or any field they endeavor, using their unique style. And lastly, we have E, which is for empathy, which can be used in close relationships and leadership, but also in knowing for strategic purposes what others are up to, sometimes even before they know. So I'm going to ask Nathaniel, pop quiz here, how he feels that this acronym applies to him in particular, or the things about it that don't resonate. So how about we go through each letter? Okay, so the S in STYLE, strategic, or depth of processing and action, since males must act and keep an eye on other males, especially those who are more aggressive. Do you feel that you have to keep an eye on other males, the aggressive men? Like, what's your role in a group of guys? If you're with a bunch of, I call them guys, testosterone-filled non-HSPs.
Yeah, well, I guess, there's sort of two parts to that as far as I see it. There's a group of guys and there's one that's sort of domineering or threatening. It sort of depends on how I feel in relation to him. If I feel threatened by that person, I might just completely back away and go in a corner and, sort of protect myself. But if it's someone that I know and, feel somewhat comfortable standing up to, I would be on guard for other men in the group who, especially the ones that might be sensitive as well, whether they're officially HSMs or just somewhat sensitive, and do what I might be able to do to sort of diffuse the situation and let him know that it's not okay to be sort of taking over or ruling the situation or picking on or bullying other people.
Do you have an example you can remember comes to mind of when you had to do that?
Yeah, I mean, probably just thinking of hanging out with my guy friends that I grew up with, and say there were half a dozen of us or so that would hang out quite regularly, and one in particular, I won't mention names, was sort of the alpha male of the group for the most part, and usually we all got along and everything was fine, but occasionally he would get a little bit overly obnoxious and start trying to get his way overall, and I was quite good at just standing up to him and saying, this isn't okay, and we would butt heads a little bit, but I think he respected my stance, and that would usually diffuse things and get it to sort of simmer down a little bit, so it wasn't so much that he was in control of the whole group.
Cool. So it's kind of like you balance things out maybe with the well, we're going to get to testosterone in a second, but yeah, that maybe usually I think HSMs in particular are really good at bringing the cognition to a situation, whereas there's, when there's a highly intense non-HSP male scene happening, there can be a lot of emotion and aggression. So the HSM can bring some calm and peace and rational thinking to the table.
It's just showing a different perspective. I think sometimes
Yes.
non-HSMs will not even consider that they may be coming across a certain way until it's pointed out to them.
Yeah, and then testosterone. Well, I never think of you as feminine, and I don't think no, but I know some men that seem more feminine, but you definitely, I mean, in terms of like, I can't get away with stuff. Like, I can't walk all over you, that's for sure. You're definitely solid and strong in your boundaries, and you speak up.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know if there's any science backing this up, but I'm guessing there's no correlation between being an HSM and having high or low testosterone levels.
Yeah, I'm guessing. Yeah.
It makes me think of a story when I was in university in residence. My next door neighbor, he was what you would consider someone who has quite high testosterone. He had a deep voice and was really sort of a guy, as you would say. But I recall one evening we were watching a movie, the boys and the girls all together in the theater or whatever it was, and it was Beaches. And in the movie, I saw this guy crying, and I was like, I couldn't. I was doing my best to hold my tears because there's no way I was going to let anybody see me crying, but I couldn't believe this big supposedly tough guy was crying. So
Yeah.
I don't know if he was necessarily an HSM, but just goes to show that even the highest testosterone kind of guys actually can be soft.
Yeah. When we're talking about testosterone, masculinity and femininity, there's so much nuance now, and I think we've developed such a much deeper and broader understanding of those terms. So we'll move on from that. Why for wise yielding? So to live to fight better another day in another way, yielding as in high yield investments. So that, she talks about this example of judo where you use the other's attack to defeat them almost effortlessly while preserving your own mental and physical energy. And I see you doing that with a lot of people. How do you think you do that?
Yeah, I mean, it might be slightly different in my case because I've always been one of the smallest guys in my class, and now one of small man by average stature. So
how tall are you?
5'6", and certainly I think I'm in
You're
decent
tall
shape.
to me.
Yes,
I'm 5'1.5".
Makes me feel big, but relative to most guys, I don't know if the average is probably close to 6 feet. So I'm quite.
I think it's 5'10".
5'10". I mean, it's all tall compared to me.
Yeah.
But and the bottom line is that I don't feel like I could physically intimidate anyone.
Right. So you have to use your brain power?
Yeah, my brain power, my sensitivity, my rationality and logic, and just sort of hope that I can get others to see my point of view and look at things differently. It's not always the case. I mean, sometimes you meet guys that are just so over the top macho or whatever, trying to prove something, and there's no getting through to them. But I'd say most people, most guys, you can talk to reasonably.
I've seen you completely disarm other men with just a few words or a look. And we're talking big, muscly, macho guys that drive big trucks, and and I've seen you completely. It's like they've got the wind knocked out of them when you say a few words sometimes.
Yeah, well, was it pen is stronger than the sword. Is that the
I
probably
think so.
watching that up? But yeah, like I say, I mean, as long as it's a semi-receptive person, then when you choose your words wisely and
Yeah,
be respectful and try not to be intimidating when you're really not,
yeah,
then yeah, it can certainly work in your favor.
yes, yes. So let's move on to L for leadership. Either among other people or becoming leaders in their fields. As she says, in the arts, science, business, athletics, or any field they endeavor, using their unique style. So how are you a leader as an HSM? How have you carved that out for yourself?
Yeah, I started my own business over 20 years ago, and worked by myself for quite a while, but eventually
Well, tell them your history of what you did before, what you studied, and why you shifted.
I studied mathematics in university and got my degree in what's called actuarial science, which is essentially the math used to predict and mitigate future risks. Most commonly used in insurance companies, but I actually worked in the pension consulting field to help calculate pensions and the funds needed to provide retirement funds for members or employees of those companies. And as exciting as that sounds to
I'm glazing over, but it's not out of boredom. It's because I don't understand any of this.
no, most people don't. Anyway, I did that for a few years and realized it wasn't for me. No creativity or very little creativity involved in it. And I had a side of me that was calling to be at least partially creative. So I took a chance and quit that and went into film school to study multimedia. So that was audio, video, web design, CD-ROM production, which doesn't exist anymore, but animation, all that kind of stuff, which was very fun. Good decision on my part to do something different, and worked for a few different companies for a few years, and then realized I'd rather just be on my own. So I started my own company, that's Enrich Media. I think it was in the year 2000, and worked on my own for I think about 6 or 7 years, and got so busy that I needed to start hiring people. And over the next 10 or so years, I hired various people, not to say that they were all there at the same time, but had several different people working at different times for me, and 2 or 3 at a time. And I never fancied myself as a boss. Didn't really think that was something in my plans, and I just sort of thought, well, I'll do this and see how it goes. And
You did
I,
well.
I was,
People love working for you.
yeah, I realized one of my employees said she didn't feel like I was a boss. And at first, when I heard that, I thought that meant that I wasn't actually doing a good job. But after I thought about it, I realized what she's saying is she didn't feel, intimidated by me. She felt like an equal. And I made a point of never calling people, my employees, are saying that so and so worked for me, but rather that they worked with me.
Mm-hmm.
When push came to shove, I was the one who had to make the final decision, and that was clearly understood. But I really, respected and wanted to make all my employees or contract workers feel heard, and I think they did. I think that really worked well. And I've never have really taught anyone, but I feel like I could help managers deal with how to work with their employees, because I've had in my previous employment, I had some pretty horrible bosses that bullied and just were horrible communicators, and just overall not pleasant to work with. And I feel like maybe having gone through those experiences and being an HSP, I just sort of realized what I would want as an employee, if that person, were my supervisor, what I would want to get. And I don't think most bosses, male or female, really think about that.
And what did you as an HSM employee need and want from those bosses at the time that you can now give back?
I think probably, well, to feel heard, but also to be sort of brought out and encouraged. I mean, there were a few times in those different jobs where I literally had nothing to do. And, it wasn't for lack of asking for work. But, there'd be times when I'd just be sitting at my desk, twiddling my thumbs and sort of pretending to work just because that's what you did. But it would have been nice if instead of me having to keep going back to the boss, the supervisor, and asking if they had anything, if they were sort of more cognizant of the fact that they actually had an employee, and checking in on them and seeing, are you busy? Is there anything you need help with? Just that's probably not something that a boss would want to have to do regularly, but at least at the beginning, or if there are certain times when things are obviously slow, that could be helpful.
Yeah. No, good point. Okay, so we've gone over the acronym style, and now I want to do a deep dive into your childhood, which is what I do, and you love it so much when I do that with you on my time off.
Free family therapy 24/7.
Don't think it's such a great thing, right? It's not always good. So what was it like growing up as an HSM? So let's talk about, first of all, peers and then your family.
With peers, it was, well, looking back, it was quite a variation depending on who my friends were. I mean, I had quite a variety of friends, and when I look back, I think probably some of them were HSPs themselves. So those friends, we really clicked, and there were never any, blow ups or issues or anything like that. If anything, maybe we didn't know what to do. I recall one friend that I in hindsight would call an HSP. We would often go to see a movie and hadn't decided in advance what movie we were going to see, and there'd be a couple of movies playing at a theater, and always be like, well, what do you want to see? I don't know. I need you to what do you want to see.
Acquiescing out of sweetness.
But so I mean, that was sort of the one extreme, and on the other extreme were, like I was saying before, the more sort of alpha male type of friends who were really pushy and needed to be kind of put in their place. So it was tough in the sense that the ones that I wouldn't call HSPs, they certainly wouldn't have had an understanding of what an HSP is, and just thinking that there's something wrong with me.
Okay, so what did people say about you that made you think there was something wrong with you?
Well, it's quite politically incorrect now, a lot of the terms that they used back then. I don't know if I want to get into those. You can probably
give us the general gist of what they meant.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot to do with the sexual orientation and that being wrong.
Well, you grew up in a very homophobic world.
Yeah, I mean, growing up, well, in Calgary, which isn't the most, or certainly wasn't at least the most liberal city at the time, and back in the 70s and 80s, those weren't the most liberal times either. So it was kind of a confluence.
You're also in a mostly Jewish community, right?
Yeah. So quite guarded, not really exposed to the real world. So yeah, if you were sort of slightly different than the norm or the average, then there must be something wrong with you. And luckily, most of my friends just accepted me as I was and didn't challenge me too often. But occasionally, there'd be some that would find me difficult to deal with, just because I was either being stubborn or just different and not going with the sort of agreed upon opinion or way of doing things.
So when you think back to when they called you stubborn, what was going on for you?
Probably just not feeling comfortable doing what they were doing in certain situations.
Mhm. And were they activities that went against your morals or your values or just your personality or temperament?
Yeah, a bit of everything. There's certain things that I don't know if I would say I have stronger or higher morals than most others, but I just have mine and I, for the most part, stick with them. But also there's certain situations I just didn't feel comfortable in putting myself into. And, occasionally I suppose I would get coerced into it and usually it wouldn't be a good thing, but I usually knew that those were situations to avoid and just
Mhm.
didn't get myself into them if I could.
Yeah, yeah. Family, did you grow up in a family that had other highly sensitive people? Did they support your sensitivity? Did they discourage it? And how did your experience in your family help or harm your development and sense of self as a highly sensitive male?
Yeah, I would say my brother is and was highly sensitive, probably in slightly different ways than me, but enough so that we could
It's
relate
just
to
the
each
two
other.
of you, to be clear, right? No sisters yeah.
Right. Um, so, we were, for the most part, a team in that sense. Um, my parents were, I don't think they were highly sensitive. My mother was constantly dealing with migraine headaches and uh, other things in her life. So we were sort of always worried about making too much noise or
Mhm.
upsetting her. And my father certainly wasn't highly sensitive. And in fact, he would say things like, "You're too sensitive." That was a fault.
I heard that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, my parents certainly accepted and loved me and my brother.
Hmm.
But I don't feel like they really got us, or at least me anyway. I think my brother was more one to sort of speak his mind and do his own thing, but
I
I was,
think he was more, yeah, verbal.
yeah, I was more quiet and shy and reserved and
Yeah. And
so,
you were the baby too.
right.
Yeah, the younger. I just have to interject with a story that when I first met your mother, she told me that you were the perfect baby because you never made a sound. And I actually gasped and I was horrified. And I said, "Oh my God," because that to me was terrifying. And I said, "Didn't you worry he was dead?" And she laughed and thought that was hilarious. And I was startled by not that you the perfect baby is one that doesn't make a noise at all. I mean, you were quiet, I get that, but that could be concerning at times if you were
Yeah,
completely quiet.
perfect in the sense that I didn't disturb her.
Right, right, right. Yeah. So you have to read between the lines. Yeah. Um, so I'm wondering now about when you look back now at your young self as a boy and as a teenager, what would you tell your younger self about how to handle the challenges that you went through being highly sensitive?
Well, before I answer that, I was just thinking it might be helpful to talk a little bit about school.
Yes, yes, we didn't talk about school.
Touched on it a little bit, I suppose, with my friends when I was growing up. But as you mentioned, I went to a Jewish private school for up until grade 9,
Mhm.
and I felt more uh, sort of at ease and fit in there. It was a bit of a cocoon. I had essentially the same kids in my class for you know 9 or 10 years. I started in kindergarten, so 10 years. There are a few coming and going here and there, but for the most part, it was the same, and I felt comfortable, raising my hand to ask questions or answer questions in class.
Well, probably because as a highly sensitive person, you felt you need you knew the territory and the environment felt safe and you had a long time to get comfortable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then grade 10, I went to a public school for high school, 10, 11, 12. And it was like I felt like I changed, but it was really the situation that changed. As here I am going from a small uh, small classes to one where there's, 1,500 students, of which I knew only the ones that came from my previous school, which, that was about 30 or so out of the 1,500.
Wow.
And I think I never once raised my hand to ask a question. And even if I knew the answer, I was almost like embarrassed to answer. I didn't want people thinking I was too smart or anything like that. So it was a completely different situation, quite uncomfortable for the most part. I started feeling a little bit more comfortable, towards the end, like grade 12 maybe, but never felt that level of comfort that I did previously in the Hebrew school.
Well, that speaks to the fact that highly sensitive people, we do much better in smaller groups and with people that we know and have a comfort level with. And you went from how many kids in your school before to 1,500?
Yeah, well, there are probably a few hundred, but
It's
only.
a big leap.
Yes.
Yeah. And so you said you're going to come back to what would you tell your younger self about how to handle these challenges? I mean, you could include that too, that going to that school in grade 10.
Yeah, well, I would say this is kind of some advice I would give not just to my younger self, but to any HSP in general is, it's about finding a balance between, pushing yourself, trying different things, sort of expanding your horizons, your boundaries, and push yourself to be a little bit uncomfortable, but at the same time, know who you are and accept that and respect that. Because if you push too far, you're going to end up feeling completely uncomfortable, and it could totally backfire. So you have to find that middle ground of growing, but not sort of exploding.
Yeah. No, pushing yourself beyond the boundaries of comfort, but not completely out of your window of tolerance, as they say.
Yeah, and if you do get into a situation where you've pushed yourself too far, hopefully you can find a way to back up and either get out of it or at least temper it somewhat.
Yeah. So it sounds like when you went to that high school in grade 10, you kind of went back into your shell.
Yeah, but I mean, it did slowly. I started to, push the boundaries a little bit. It felt more comfortable after I started to get to know other people, but it was challenging.
I see a strength of yours that I've noticed. If we go to a gathering of some sort, you usually just hold back and sort of watch and observe. And I dive in a little bit more than you, even though we're both HSPs. I'm more of an extroverted HSP, and you're more introverted. And I see it as like we'll come home and I'm exhausted and you're fine. And I think of it like, why did I expend all that energy? You reserve your energy. You just kind of watch, and then it's like you're assessing whether anybody's worth really spending energy on. And then if you decide to take a chance, then that gives you energy because you're enjoying yourself, but I notice you don't waste time on people that suck your energy.
No, I mean, it's probably also partly the cancer in me, not the disease cancer, but the sun sign. In that I kind of stand back, and then every once in a while I like go out a little bit this way and a little bit this way. It feels comfortable if I'm talking to somebody and I feel like, it's an equal conversation. They're understanding me and I'm understanding them and finding each other mutually interesting. Then I might go a little bit more and a little bit more. But if I go out and somebody I can just tell pretty quickly they're not somebody I'm the slightest bit interested in, then I might be polite for a minute or two, and then I'm bye. Nice meeting you.
I find it so funny because I always want to meet people, and you're just happy just doing your thing. But you always say to me that you'd rather be alone than be around people that irritate you or that you don't enjoy, which I think is a lot of wisdom right there.
Yeah, I've learned at a young age to enjoy my own company. And that's,
Yeah.
when I was a kid, I did have lots of friends and did a lot of things with them, but I still enjoy just being at home, and I had all these games that I'd play by myself, and
Hmm.
doing artwork or puzzles or that sort of thing on my own, and that was fine. I didn't think that was weird or there was anything wrong with me for that.
Yeah, I call it being self-entertaining.
Yeah.
And I heard a quote once that I loved, and this person said, "Why would I want to be, why would you want to be alone with me if I don't want to be alone with me?" And yeah, yeah, that's good. So we've talked about school, your family growing up as an HSM, and the workforce. I think you spoke to the fact that highly sensitive people in general do well when we work for ourselves and we can control our environment, and the people in our workspace and our own schedule and all of that. So the last question I have is, what message of hope? I'm just trying to think of people who might be watching this or listening to this, who might feel a little bit discouraged, because they're highly sensitive men and they haven't found their footing yet. Maybe they're younger and they're struggling. What message of hope, as a man in his early to mid 50s, say, what message of hope would you like to leave these HSMs who are in that situation?
I think the world is changing a lot. They're back, 10, 20, 30 years ago, there were a lot of things, not just HSPs, but a lot of sort of characteristics or personality traits or, genetic traits or whatever you want to call them, that were not accepted at all.
Mm-hmm.
And the world's waking up slowly, but it's happening now. And I think people are realizing that, whether it's HSPs or introverts or both, that we're people and we have different needs than everyone else, and it doesn't mean that we're
Mm-hmm.
weird or wrong or
Mm-hmm.
anything like completely out of the ordinary, but it's just another thing to sort of learn about. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there's, HSPs are sort of coming out of the woodwork, and it's not like we're taking over the world by any means. Like
I kind of felt we were during COVID,
a
like
little
during the
bit, yeah.
lockdown. I felt like we've inherited the universe.
Yeah, it was kind of our place and our time to shine in a sense. But when if the world's back to normal now, or when it officially gets back to normal, I think there's just so much more information and more stuff getting out there. I read an article recently about just talking about introverts in the workplace, and what you as a manager can do to sort of bring out the best of them. And I think anyone that cares about their business or the company that they're a supervisor or a boss in will realize, if they haven't already, that it's to their advantage to have a wide variety of people working for them, but including in that if there's HSPs, to sort of harness their skills that other people don't have. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's not just like this horrible thing being an HSP, meaning that you're less than other people. Like, you're probably skilled in other areas
Yeah.
that most people
Yeah.
aren't. And if you're a good boss or supervisor, you should be able to see that and
Yeah.
take advantage of that, to get more production out of them that you might not from other people, or different ideas or different perspectives. And I think a lot of people are starting to look at things that way. So that does give me hope.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that there's a place for all of us, and we all have our strengths and things to contribute that are, invaluable.
Yeah.
Yes. I know what one question I was going to ask you about dating. I forgot to ask you about.
Oh, right. Yes.
Right. About what it was like, being attracted to people, I guess, as a teenager, and just dating as an HSP, HSM.
Yeah. So I don't know if this is the case for all HSPs or HSMs, but I started liking girls in kindergarten. I remember when I was 5 years old. There was a
You
cute girl in my class. I thought she had a really nice smile, and I had a question if that's what you call it when you're 5 years old.
So cute.
From then on, there was always at least one girl in my class that I liked, or moving on from school into work and other things. Always somebody that I was interested in, but inevitably I was like always too shy to talk to them, or let alone ask them out. I remember back in grade 6, I don't know if I could say she was officially my girlfriend, but there was a girl that I liked, and of course you would ask your friend to ask their friend if they liked you, and there was mutual admiration there.
And then you would go around with each other.
I was even too scared to go around with her.
What the hell does that even mean, go around?
I know. I had my friend and I went on a double date with this girl and her friend. And I had like nothing to do with the organizing of it or making any phone calls. I just showed up. And I was okay on the date, but
What was it like leading up to the date? Did you have anxiety?
Yeah, well, I remember I was sick with a cold. I probably should have canceled, but I think I was pretty nervous leading up to it. But I mean, that was one of the few times I actually went through with even sort of asking somebody out and going on a date. And all these, for some reason at dances, I was not too shy to ask a girl to dance. But I think with a few words I could sputter out and ask someone and then actually dance with them. And then when the dance was over, I'd say thank you. And then that was
maybe it was easy because you didn't have to talk.
Yeah, I think so. That was probably it.
Yeah.
And then, but as far as asking anyone out, I just couldn't bring myself to get up the nerve to ask any girl out. And this, not just through school, but like when I was a young adult, and even now, if I were single, I think it would still be really difficult to. I mean, it's probably easier now with online dating and stuff. But if there were like some woman that I thought I looked attractive or looked interesting to me, I wouldn't just be able to go up to her and say hi and start talking. Like, seems a lot of people say, like, just go up and say hi and start talking.
So in case of any you were wondering, I don't worry about him cheating.
Physically impossible.
That would be the biggest shocker of my life.
Yeah, so no, that was tough, and I kind of feel like it's a bit of a loss, in my childhood, that it, it'd just be nice to have these memories of having dated way more than I did. I mean, not that I didn't at all, but probably like 10% as much as I might have liked to.
I'll trade you the crappy experiences I had dating at too young an age.
Yeah, there might have been some. I certainly had some learning experiences, but there probably would have been some nice ones mixed in there. Yeah. So yeah, it's tough. If I were to give my younger self or someone in that situation advice, I'm still not 100% sure what to say. But yeah, just see if there's a way that you can feel comfortable. Well, I'll tell you, here's one good example of something that was semi-successful, because I in university, there was a girl in one of my classes that I thought was really cute and seemed nice. I had never met her before. And again, I wasn't just going to go up to her and introduce myself or come up with some silly line. So they had a directory for all the students at the university. And she was in a lab of mine, so I figured out what her name was based on
statistical probability.
No, it was a genetics lab, so she had her name on her box of fruit flies.
Oh, very romantic.
Yes. But anyway, I remember her name on me, and I looked her up.
I didn't know that story.
No, I don't know.
Name on her fruit fly. Oh, okay, sorry.
Not physically on all the fruit flies, but on her box of fruit flies.
On the box, okay. Yeah. That would have hurt the fruit flies.
Yes, and it would have been harder than writing your name on a grain of rice, I would think.
I would think.
So yeah, I looked up her name in this student directory. I got her most people would have gotten her phone number and called her, but not me. I got her address and I wrote her a
You
letter.
research. Oh, that is old school charm.
Old school, yes.
Sweet.
So
Classy.
yeah, and it worked. I sent her a letter, and I remember, being anxious to see what was going to happen. And a week or so later, I got a letter back from her
Ah,
saying, I don't think she knew who I was, but she seemed intrigued and gave me her phone number. And then I was comfortable. It was still anxiety provoking to call her, but at least it wasn't unexpected, and we had a starting point. So
right.
that
Work your
certainly
way.
made things easier. So I don't know if people still write letters these days, but either, I mean, if you
That's
really want to
very
be
romantic.
unique and romantic or whatever, you could do that. But obviously, email or DMs or whatever the kids do these days, it's maybe an easier icebreaker than having to go up and
Yeah.
talk to somebody, or maybe
Yeah.
put a note in their bag or something like that. So
Sure
there's
beats
ways.
someone sending you a picture of their what.
Not recommended.
That's not romantic, people.
No, no matter what.
That's just never a good, I don't know. I don't get it personally, but
Taking an awkward turn.
yes. Well, why don't we wind up here? You feel it's complete?
I think so, yes.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
My pleasure. I'll see you at dinner.
See you at dinner.